Almost 60 years ago, I entered the 5th grade at Reynolds Elementary School. My teacher had a reputation. We students knew things were about to get a little more challenging, and they did. At the beginning of that year, I disappointed my new teacher with my effort. I never wanted to disappoint her again. Miss Lucy Bell Fuller turned out to be one of the great influences in my life. As an adult, I saw her fairly often. I felt she was just as proud of me as she was her own child. I'm also positive she made sure her other former students felt the same. Some 30 years after she taught me, I was responsible for laying this remarkable lady, who had earned much respect from so many, to rest. Now, almost 30 years after Miss Fuller's death, I had the privilege of talking with her one and only granddaughter, Katie Harris Dodrill, and you're about to hear it. I have heard there are no tears in heaven, but I sure believe there are smiles there. I am confident Miss Fuller is smiling as she listens to this conversation. A couple of Harris grandparents are smiling too. I'll let Katie tell you why her YouTube channel is called While I Read. She is an avid reader, and her passion for reading may rub off on you, or at least motivate you to find her YouTube channel and watch, listen, and be motivated there. But you will also be inspired by her wonderful family who raised her, including wonderful parents and grandparents. And the story of how she met her husband, Ryan, well, you'll have to just listen and smile with me. You will also smile at God's gift to them, a beautiful little girl named Sarah Grace. While Katie was reading, it seemed God was working things out in her life and the lives of those around her. While Katie reads, a lot still goes on in her life. Her husband is busy making a living doing something that is completely over my head, and she is busy being a college professor, which is also over my head. Did I mention they are smart? Like really smart? Together, they're raising a little girl incredibly well. They also find time to drive 3 hours round trip on the weekends to spend the night with her parents and attend church the next day with them. While she reads, Katie has also co-written a book, is revising another book she wrote, and is working on 2 more books. She also reads a lot. In 2023, a lot equal to 86 books. And somehow, while she reads, she spent almost an hour with me on this podcast. I am impressed with Katie Dodrill, and you are about to be impressed too.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. I've got a special guest with me today. I've known this girl, I've known her mama since we were in the 1st grade, and I've known her daddy about that long. Katie Harris Dodrill is with me. Katie, thank you for taking the time to do this. You're a busy college professor, and I know you're busy, but thank you for talking to me.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to talk with you. I am just really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, what I've noticed, and I saw it on social media, and I went to it and looked, and let's just talk about this. You have started a YouTube channel. It's very interesting. I was blown away about how many books you're reading, and you've been doing this a long time. But let's talk about, off the top, talk about your YouTube channel, why you're doing it, a little bit of what motivated you to put this out here.
Okay, well, the YouTube channel is called While I Read, and I started it just I've been thinking about it for a while, about, people have these YouTube channels where they just talk about what they're reading. And these people are called booktubers. And there is a whole subset of YouTube called BookTube, where people talk about what they're reading. And so I've been thinking for a while about, maybe I could do something like this, but I could never figure out exactly, it never seemed like a good time to start. I wasn't sure how I wanted to start. But on Christmas Day this year, I just said to my husband, I think I should just make a video of the top 10 books that I read in 2023. And maybe I should start a YouTube channel. And my husband, Ryan, just said, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll help you. And so we just started doing it. And I got my first video published in January. So it's been a really exciting process to do this.
So many years ago, and I'm not sure what year, 2008 or 9, whenever I published my second book, my friend Larry Walker, who's a lawyer from Perry, Georgia, and he wrote a column for the Macon paper and also the Houston County paper, but he every year wrote an article about, I don't know if it was the top 10 books he read that year, the top 5, I'm not sure what it was, but I was blown away when my book was listed on his list, and people started getting in touch with me to get my book. That the little plugs help people when you talk about their books. It makes people want to go get their books, and I know that hearing you talk about some of these books on your YouTube channel will not only entice people to read those certain books that you talk about, but it will entice people to read, period. And I think that's kind of lacking in our society a little bit. So I think it's very neat what you're doing. So before we get into your books, I want to talk a little bit about you. You are a college professor, and talk about what you teach and how did you get there? What was your journey to become a professor?
So I grew up in a family of teachers. You, of course, know my family. You know my grandmother, Lucy Bell, who was your teacher when you were in school. So she was a teacher, and then both of my parents are retired teachers. And I could see how much education meant to them, how much they enjoyed teaching, how much their students loved them, how much they were able to help their students. So I kind of always knew that I was going to end up in the education field. I started teaching in Taylor County at Taylor County Middle School, and I taught 7th and 8th grade language arts. And I taught there for several years. I taught in Taylor County for 8 years, and I enjoyed that. But I had always been interested in teaching at the college level. And so in 2012, I saw a job opening. I heard about a job opening at Andrew College, which I had heard of before, but didn't know a whole lot about it. And so I kind of looked it up and saw it was in Cuthbert, Georgia, very small town in southwest Georgia. And I said, well, I'm going to apply for this job. I don't know that I have any chance of getting it, but I'm going to apply for it. And so I applied for the job teaching learning support English, which is for students who need extra help passing college level English courses. I applied for the job. I did a phone interview. I came for an in-person interview and a teaching presentation, and I got the job. And that was in 2012, and I've been here at Andrew College ever since then. And now I teach English composition courses, like the freshman composition course that everybody has to take. And I also am the academic success coordinator, meaning that I run the tutoring programs that we have here at Andrew College. We have a couple of in-person tutoring programs, and we also have an online tutoring program. So I just love it here. It's a very small college. I know almost all of our students.
I'm sure.
Know all of our faculty. And so it's just a really good place to work, and I've really enjoyed being here.
So she just said something, folks, that I want to bring up. Miss Fuller, who taught me in the 5th grade and taught a lot of other people I know in the 5th grade, she was one special lady, and we're going to talk about her grandparents on both sides in a minute, because I know both of your sets of grandparents impacted you. But she was one special lady. Katie, I'll never forget, I took a test from her one time, and I made like a 15 on it, and I obviously had not studied, didn't know we were going to have a test, or if I did know it, I didn't prepare for it. And she wrote on there, Bruce, 15 in red, circled it. Bruce, I am very disappointed in you. I'll never forget that. And I never wanted to disappoint her again. She was a master teacher, yes. And your mother was in my class with me. Oh man, that was some great times, and there's a lot of people besides me that benefited from her. But we're going to talk about all of your grandparents, because I know they had a lot to do with what you're doing now. But before we get into your grandparents, I want to talk about your parents. I mean, you've got Bunny and Mark Harris are special folks. I mean, that number one, they're smart, but
Yes.
they love life. They're just wonderful people. You got to tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up for those two to be your parents.
Well, I can't imagine having any better parents than what I had. You know, I'm an only child, and so growing up, it was just Mama and Daddy and me. And, you know, they're, as you say, they're both very smart. They're both very kind people. We laugh because Mama was always kind of the overachiever when she was in school. You know, she got all A's, and she was in so many clubs and organizations, and was always, you know, on winning basketball teams, of course, and also on winning parliamentary procedure teams through FBLA, and just did so much. Daddy kind of jokes that it takes people like him to make people like Mama shine, because he jokes that he was just sort of a, I don't know the exact word. He was a good basketball player, and, you know, he did a lot of things, but school was just not as important to him as it was to Mama, and then later to me. And so, you know, I got different things from both of them. Mama taught me how much to value hard work and education, and, you know, she was just really encouraging to me in everything that I tried to do. And Daddy was also encouraging to me, but he also reminded me that it was okay if I didn't do as well in some things.
Yeah.
You know, he would always just remind me, you don't have to do everything, and it's okay if you don't do as well. And so they were both such a good balance for me. And still now, you know, everything I do, I tell Mama and Daddy about it. I get their advice on, you know, work things in my personal life. They're just a huge part of my life, and of course a huge part of my husband Ryan and my daughter Sarah Grace's life.
You used the word balance, and that is very true. They balanced each other. They're different personalities. They're both brilliant. Your daddy taught school forever too. He's a historian. He's a walking encyclopedia about the history of the United States. But he's just a laid back country farmer type personality, and that balance in parents is what created you. I think the lesson is everybody doesn't have to be the same, right? I mean, it's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank God.
Now I'm worried that what I said makes my daddy sound like some kind of slacker.
Oh,
and
he's not, as you know. No,
he's not.
No, I promise you, he's one smart guy and a great guy. Both of them. I just got.
Yes.
I don't know anybody, Katie, that doesn't have great respect for your parents, and I know that balance in your parents impacted you greatly in your life. I mean, you had a head up on a lot of people in life because of the parents you had. You didn't earn that. You didn't deserve it. God did that, right?
Right. I thank God every day that he gave me the parents that he did.
So let's talk about your grandparents. And I'm doing this for a reason. I just think it's good to get parents to be listening to this, grandparents. We have no idea the impact that we're having on those people that God has entrusted to us. But let's talk about the Harris side first on your grandparents. Again, people that were very involved. Your granddaddy was a farmer. Your grandmother was a homemaker. They salt of the earth people, just well respected in the county. Talk about them and the influence they had.
Right. Well, so my granddaddy was Emory Harris, and my granny was Johnny Granger Harris. I did not know my granddaddy Emory. I was 2 when he passed away. And so, unfortunately, I can't remember him. I really wish that I could. I only know him through the stories that I hear, you know, from my family and from other people like you who knew him. And I know that he was just a respected man in the county. I know that he was a farmer who worked hard and was always kind to people. And, you know, lots of people tell me stories about what a great man that he was. My granny, Johnny Harris, she kept me when I was a baby, from after Mama started back to work after she had me until I started school. Granny stayed with me, and she always says that we helped each other because, you know, after Granddaddy Emory died, she was really sad, and she said that being able to keep me was a distraction for her and, you know, gave her something to look forward to. So Granny and I had a very close relationship. She was the branch manager of the library in Butler for many years, up until she was in her 90s. And so I spent a lot of time at the library with her when I was growing up, and also a lot of time at her house just listening to stories and learning from her. She's probably the greatest Christian I've ever had the privilege to be around.
So you were growing up around books from not only from your parents, their love for reading, but your grandmother worked in the library. You were hanging around books all your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So your granddaddy Emery was also, he was a farmer, but he's also the chairman of the school board for years. No telling how many years. And again, folks, these were fantastic people. On both sides of her family. Talk about your granddaddy Fuller.
My grandparents on that side, Bernard Fuller and Lucy Bell Fuller. And so, of course, my grandmother, Lucy Bell, was a teacher, a well-respected teacher. It was funny, when I started teaching school, a lot of the parents and grandparents of my students had grandmama as a teacher.
Oh, yeah.
And they would, tell me stories about grandmama. And I think it sort of helped the students respect me a little bit more because they knew these stories about my grandmother. Grandmama knew how important an education was. And so she would always encourage me to read. The family story is that she read me my first book when I came home from the hospital as a baby. And it's a true story. When they brought me home from the hospital, she held me in her arms and read The Three Little Pigs. Right. And of course, a lot of people would say, well, a newborn baby, that doesn't mean anything. They don't know anything about that. But I definitely think that making it a habit to read to children, which my grandmother did from the time I was a tiny baby, definitely influenced me in becoming a reader myself and later in becoming a teacher. And so we did the same thing when Sarah was born. On the day I brought her home from the hospital, my mama read the story of Goldilocks to her because Sarah had golden hair. So mama made sure she got a copy of Goldilocks and read it to Sarah.
Wow. Miss Fuller read to you. I remember, I'm sure you have the same, now that you've been teaching so long, you see students that you taught that have grown up, and I know that you never forget these people. You would not believe the attention that Miss Fuller gave me as an adult. She probably wondered if I'd ever make it at all, when she was teaching me. But, I would see her in town at the store or at the funeral home, and she gave me so much respect, and I felt like I did not disappoint her at the end. I did when at 15. I made the test, but she seemed to be as proud of me, and I know she was as the other students, and I know you find that as well of people you've taught, and you see that grew up probably did a little better in some of them than you thought they would, right? And it's I'm sure it's got to be an amazing feeling.
I'm so proud when I see students that I taught who are, I have students who are teachers, students who are nurses, who are pharmacists, and I just love seeing that they're successful. It just makes me so happy to see that.
Okay, folks, we've got Katie Dodrill on the phone. I'm going to be right back. We're going to talk about a little bit about her husband and how he met her and her this little girl, Sarah Grace, that's changed her life. And we're going to get into some of these books she's been reading and her love for reading. So just stay tuned. We'll be right back. So, Katie, talk about how you met your hubby, Ryan. Boy, y'all seem like a match from heaven. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we are an online dating success story. We met on eHarmony.
Okay, folks, you hear it. You're hearing it right here. How long have you been married, Katie?
Since 2016. Okay. So we just celebrated our seventh wedding
anniversary, and they met on eHarmony. So there's hope for you out there, folks. But go ahead, Katie. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, we were both on eHarmony. I had just joined, and Ryan had been on it for a few months, and was thinking about canceling his subscription. But we were matched, and so we started emailing, and that was in December of 2015 that we started emailing. And we started talking, and we did some video chats. And in April of 2016, he came to visit me for the first time. And so Ryan lived in Tampa, Florida, which is about 6 or 7 hours from Cuthbert, Georgia, where I was.
Right.
And so, it couldn't be just a quick first date where we go out to dinner and go home. He had to come for the whole weekend. And so he got a hotel here in Cuthbert, which is a difficult thing to do. Cuthbert is a small town, and it is very hard to find a hotel room, but he did. And so he came to visit me. And that was a very stressful experience. We have a lot of family jokes about it now.
I can imagine.
I was really nervous, and I was on the phone with my parents when he pulled up in the yard. And when I saw his car pull up, I said, "Oh, crap, he's here." And hung up on my parents.
So that was going to be my next question. Did they know you were meeting this stranger that was coming to see you? Did they worry that he was going to hit you over the head with a hammer or something?
They knew all about it. By that point, we were friends on Facebook. He was friends with them on Facebook. I think we were even friends with his parents on Facebook. So we were fairly certain that he was not a psychopath, but not totally certain. Right. And so he came to see me, and so we we went out to eat, and we hung out a little bit. And so then that night he went back to his hotel room, and I called my parents and I said, "I just want him to go home." and it was just such a stressful experience, just meeting somebody for the first time and knowing that I have to spend the whole weekend with this person.
Oh, wow.
And so my parents talked to me a little bit, and, they said, "Katie, he's come all this way. You can't send him home. You have to hang out with," because they talked to me and they realized that he had not done anything horrible. He was just as nice as he could be, but I was just scared. And so the next day, Ryan came to see me again, and we had plans for that day, but I told him all the plans have been changed. We're going to Crowell to meet my parents. And so Ryan, just being the easygoing guy he is, said, "Okay," and just rolled with it. And so we went to Crowell. I introduced him to my family.
So, folks, let me put a comma. Crowell is not around the corner. How long did it take to get to Crowell?
It's about an hour and a half drive from Cuthbert.
Okay.
And so we rode, and being in the car together gave us some time to talk and, get to know each other a little bit more. And so we went to Crowell and spent the day with my parents. We always laugh because my mama had cooked lunch that day, and she cooked boiled okra. And I didn't know it at the time, but Ryan is a very picky person, and he does not eat a lot of vegetables. But that day he ate the boiled okra and acted like he liked it.
Oh, you got your man there. There's no woman I'd eat boiled okra over. I can just tell you that.
He has never eaten it since, but he ate it that day and acted like he liked it. And so by the end of the day, after spending time with my parents and, getting to know Ryan a little more, I decided, okay, this isn't so bad. And by the next day, the Sunday that he went home, we had decided that we were going to get married. And we did the following November. So
after you were not liking him on Friday, by Sunday you were ready to marry him. Wow.
Yes.
So what changed? What did the
light
light turn on?
I didn't like him. I did like him. It was just that I was nervous. This was a person that I had met online, and that we had, talking on the phone to somebody is different from being with them in person. And I just had to get used to that. And so it wasn't anything about Ryan. It was just me being nervous. And then once I was able to relax some, and, Ryan is just such a nice, easygoing person. And I started feeling more comfortable. And so we just fell in love.
And you got married 6 months later about, right?
Yeah. I got married in November of 2016 after meeting for the first time in April of 2016.
Well, you were talking about it, that when you met him, you didn't know whether he was a psycho or not. I've been married to my wife for 47 years. She still doesn't know whether I'm a psycho or not. So you won't ever get out of it. So how long was it before your precious little Sarah Grace came into the world?
Let's see. She was born in 2019. So about 2.5 years later, I guess.
So talk about how she has changed both of you. Y'all, you look like Ryan's such a good daddy. I mean, I know you're a good mama, but he's such a good daddy. It's just, when you look at it from my perspective, y'all got a wonderful, wonderful family there.
Well, thank you. And yes, we just love Sarah Grace. I mean, she is the light of our lives. All of the cliches that people say about parenthood are true. It's just having her is the greatest accomplishment of my life, and watching her every day as she grows and changes is just amazing. I was 35 when I married Ryan, and I was 37 when Sarah was born. And as I was getting older, I had sort of thought, well, this it may not happen for me. I may not ever become a mother. And so the fact that it did was such a blessing for me. And the fact that we have this beautiful little girl who, is healthy and happy and smart, that's something else that I thank God for every day. I try not to take that for granted.
Yeah, you guys come to Butler or Reynolds every weekend, right? So she's spending time with her grandparents too, and I know you're also close to his parents as well, right?
Yes, we do visit Mama and Daddy at Crowell almost every weekend. Sarah now, we've got a tradition where she goes home with them on Friday afternoons. They'll come to pick her up after school. She's in pre-K, and so they'll come pick her up, and she'll spend the night with them. And Ryan and I will come on Saturday and, spend time with them on Saturday, and then go to church on Sunday. And then Ryan's family lives in Fort Myers, Florida. So we don't get to see them as often, but they come up here to visit us a lot. They bought some land up here. So, they come up here to see us, and we go down to Fort Myers as often as we can to visit them. Right. So we're very lucky with our
great
family.
Bunny, your mother has told me my mother came from Fort Myers, and our family goes way back there. And
That's right. I do. I remember that connection.
So I grew up going to Fort Myers, and we know some of the same people, I think, that we've identified. Folks, I've got Katie Dodrill on the phone. What a story about how she met her husband and this little baby, Sarah Grace, that came into their lives that now is a beautiful little girl. And we're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about these books she's reading and her love for reading, and kind of maybe whet your appetite to read a little bit more. We'll be right back. So you mentioned your grandmother read to you, which you don't even remember. Your mother read to Sarah Grace when she was born. Just talk about a little bit. You love to read.
Well, I definitely think my grandmother, Lucy Bell's influence had a lot to do with it, because, of course, I don't remember the book she read when I was a newborn, the day I came home from the hospital, but throughout my life, she would always read to me. Mama talks about how grandmama would go to the library and just check out armfuls of books every week and bring them home to read to me. So, that definitely had a lot to do with it. As I mentioned, my granny was the branch manager of the library in Butler. And so sometimes I would just go and spend the afternoon with her at the library. And I can remember just walking along, looking at the shelves, running my finger along the spines of the books, trying to find something to read. And the first book that I remember really loving, reading on my own and loving, was by Roald Dahl, and it was called The BFG, which stands for The Big Friendly Giant. And Roald Dahl is the author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach. So a lot of books that are fairly well-known children's books. And I remember reading The BFG when I was probably in about second grade. And that's when I truly realized, oh, this is really fun. I like doing this. And so then I started finding books for myself and reading them. And I kind of just took off from there. And that's when I knew that I was going to be a reader.
So you really, when you look back, it began with people reading to you. And so I assume that's important for parents to read to their little kids, right?
Yes, it's so important. And I also have to mention my teachers, because I had so many good teachers going through school. And if I start trying to name them all, I know that I'll leave somebody off. One that I remember that really influenced me a lot was Mrs. Brenda Wade when I was in third grade. because she taught me English. And, of course, I loved reading. And so she was always recommending books to me and encouraging me in that. That was also the year that we had a writing contest at school, and I won the school writing contest. And I got to go to the RISA writing contest, which is like the regional level. And I won at the regional level as well. And I can remember just how proud Miss Wade was when I came back, how she hugged me and just praised me so much. And, that kind of thing just means a lot to a child. And I can remember the other teachers. One of the things I told them was, because I had won first place, I got a trophy. And the people who won second and third place, their prize was a book. And I said, I kind of felt bad because I didn't get a book and those others did. So the other teachers at the school just gathered up all of the books they had in their classroom libraries and gave them to me, just to encourage me. And so, just the encouragement that I had from my teachers means a lot too.
Boy, teachers are real influencers, aren't they? We don't know it when we're being taught as kids, but when you look back, you realize how important they've been in your life. They're things that happen. They're moments in time that absolutely created you. And you just talked about one of them. Those memories jump out. Yes. Teachers are underpaid and underappreciated, but they're very, very important. They've been important in my life. Even the ones that I thought were bad at the time probably were some of the best ones.
My first memory of you is when my grandmother Lucy Bell passed away. And I went with Mama and Daddy to the funeral home to talk with you.
Really?
I don't know why, I came along. Maybe it was just there was nobody to keep me or something, but I went with them. And I remember hearing you talk to my mama that day about how much you loved my grandmama and what a good teacher she was. And I could see how much that comforted my mama to be talking with you about that. And I just remember just being, and I was also kind of in awe because I had never thought about, a funeral director actually being a profession somebody could have. And so,
Sure.
So I was, a little surprised by that, but also I just remember how much you talked about how you loved my grandmother so much and what a good teacher she was.
And I did. And the truth is, she was not an easy teacher. She was not, some teachers were easy. She was tougher, but she was a wonderful person. I was telling her the truth. I mean, I really did. She was one of the big influences in my life when I look back. So many great memories. I appreciate you saying that. I don't remember that conversation, but I remember when she died. In fact, I think every one of my teachers from first grade through the 8th grade, I ended up laying them to rest. And I thought about it each time. I can tell you that. Wow, time goes by.
Yeah.
So I was listening on your YouTube channel, and you mentioned that you normally don't count the number of books that you read, but you're using I forgot what it was, you're using a program now. And you got to tell these folks how many books you read in 2023.
Well, I had never, made a list before of the books that I read in a year, but there's an app called Goodreads. I guess it's a website, but I have it as an app on my phone. And so on Goodreads, there are a lot of things that the app can do, but one thing that it can do is you can put in the book that you're reading, and you can put your dates that you've read it. And so then it will keep a tally of all the books that you've read during a year. And so you can go back and look and see what you've read. And so in 2023, I read 86 books, and watching some other booktubers, that's not really a lot. There are people who read like 120 books in a year. But for me, it's a lot.
You're a mama. You're active in your church. You teach school every day, teach college every day. It's amazing. Do you read the actual books, or you're using a Kindle, or do you do both?
I use Kindle a lot more now just because it's so convenient to me. It's easy to take my Kindle everywhere I go. it's just one thing that I have to keep up with. With a real book, I'm constantly putting it down and losing it.
Right.
And with my Kindle, and now I also have an air tag on my Kindle. So when I lose it,
you can find it. Yeah.
I can make it beep so I can find it. And so it's very convenient. I do love the smell and the feel of a real book, but I read more on my Kindle now.
I feel the same way. I like to hold the book, but it's also easy to read and to keep up with on a device for sure.
Yes.
But a lot of people still like to hold those books. This is 1 year, 89 books. Is that a normal year for you? I'm sure there's been years you've read more or less, but is that kind of normal, what you normally read in a year?
I've never kept up with it before. I think probably before I had Sarah, I was reading more because I just had more time.
Sure. And before you met Ryan, right?
Yeah, probably so. Before when I was young and single, I probably read a lot more than, after now that I'm married and have a child, I have more responsibilities. But whenever I have any free time, I'm reading. My mama laughs at me because I take my Kindle everywhere I go because you just never know when you might get a moment of free time.
Right.
And if I have free time, what I want to be doing is reading.
What I do is when I read, especially at night, I get sleepy. So I guess you train yourself to stay up to read, right? I'm serious. I have a time.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
A lot of after Sarah goes to bed, that's generally what I do. I get in my bed and, for a couple of hours or however long I have, I read. And I do get very sleepy sometimes. And so,
sure.
Yeah, I do try to stop when I start realizing the Kindle is slipping out of my hand and I'm falling asleep.
What kind of books do you enjoy most? Do you read for entertainment, or are you reading for education, or you're reading?
Well, I just read so many different things, and it just sort of depends on, what's going on in my life. So generally, I do read fiction books. I read very few nonfiction books. Not that those books are not good or not interesting, but I just seem to gravitate more towards fiction books. Right now, I'm reading more mystery and thriller books, and I'm not sure the reason for that, but those books seem to keep me interested. I think maybe it's because I'm really busy, and those books are ones that it's not hard for me to concentrate on because I can read them and want to keep reading to find out what happens. But I also love fantasy books like the Harry Potter books. Robin McKinley is a really good fantasy author that I've read a lot by. And I do still love children's books. I read to my daughter, Sarah, and I read the BFG, my favorite book as a child, and I've read her Charlotte's Web and a book called Thimble Summer. So, I really enjoy reading children's books as well. So I have very wide, varied taste in reading.
Well, what's your favorite top 2 or 3 books that you've ever read? Well, I know that's a difficult question for somebody who reads a lot of books, but just throw a couple out there that are in the top of your tier.
Whenever I have to say, my favorite author of all time, Jane Austen will generally be the answer. I started reading Jane Austen when I was in 9th grade. My first book I read by her was Emma, and I just loved it. I love Jane Austen's descriptions of people and just her satire of the silly things that people do is just timeless. Her books are set and she wrote them during the Regency period in England, but it's amazing how people haven't changed. And that's what I think every time I read any of Jane Austen's novels. Ryan and I were able to go on a trip to England a few years ago before Sarah was born, and we were able to visit a home where Jane Austen lived, which was just amazing. One of the highlights of my life, getting to visit there. So Jane Austen is usually who I say when I'm asked who my favorite author is, and my favorite books are by Jane Austen. Some of the other favorite books that I can remember, growing up, I loved the Anne of Green Gables books by L.M. Montgomery. There's also a mostly out of print British author named D.E. Stevenson, who I got into. My granny got me into those books when she was the librarian. And I have a lot of those books that I bought from the library because they're older and they weren't that popular. And so whenever they would have book sales at the library, I would buy those books. And I think about my granny when I see or hold those books because I can remember checking them out from her at the library. So those are some of my favorites, and I could go on a lot longer on this question.
Does Ryan read like you? Does he read as much as you do? Does he enjoy reading?
Ryan likes to read. He does not read as much as I do. He likes to play games, like computer games. And so a lot of times at night, he'll be on one side of the bed playing a game, and I'll be on the other side reading my book.
He actually creates the games. Just tell everybody what he does for a living. I mean, he's writing code for games, right?
Yes, Ryan works for a computer game company called Ardix Entertainment that makes games for kids. I believe it's an age range from about 10 to 14. And he writes code for a game called Adventure Quest Worlds. And so I really don't understand at all what he does. Every now and then he'll show me a computer screen that just has a bunch of gibberish on it. And that is stuff that he writes. And it's the stuff that makes the game work. Like it makes the character move. So it's pretty amazing.
Folks, you can tell these are amazing people. It's an amazing couple. That's way out of my realm for what he's doing. But I knew he did that because your mom and dad told me. I asked him one day, he's writing code. You don't forget that. You might forget what somebody said they worked at a drugstore, but you don't forget a man that's writing code for computer games, which are so popular now. So, Katie, how do you believe reading has helped you in your life?
Well, I think my love of reading has made me into the person that I am. The fact that I loved reading is what made me decide to go to college and major in English and then become a teacher. And I wouldn't be doing any of this if I had not had that love of reading that my parents and my grandparents instilled in me.
What is your advice to people that are listening to this? And I know this is going to be happening as we talk. They're saying, man, I don't read hardly any, and I would love to start reading. What would you suggest they do? What should they read to get started?
Yeah, I have a lot of students who are like that. They just don't really like reading. And what I generally tell them is try to find a book that you're interested in. And I know that's easier said than done, but if you keep looking, you're going to find something that's interesting to you, whether it's a nonfiction book on some hobby that you're interested in, or maybe it's a fiction book that's, about a character that you're interested in. If you start reading something and you don't like it after a chapter or two, stop reading and find something else. Don't keep trying to force yourself, unless, of course, it's an assignment for a class, and then you should force yourself to read it.
Right.
But just keep trying to find it. And if you find the right thing, you're going to want to read it. It's not going to seem like work to you. It's going to be something that you enjoy.
Yeah, you can't wait to turn to the next page. It's like watching a movie. You're into it.
Yes.
You want to read what's next. You got to keep up.
Yeah.
And you're sad when it's over, right?
Yes. I tell them, because my students understand this, I say, it's like binge watching a show. If you find a show on Netflix that you like, you want to just keep watching it, and you can do it for hours and hours. And that's what I'm like with reading. I want to just keep reading when I start reading something that's good.
Right. So, Katie, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I know that's a crazy question, but is it one that you've thought of?
It's not something that I think of a lot. And, when I do think of it, I'm like, wow, in 10 years, I'm going to be 52 years old. Sarah is going to be 14 years old. It's crazy to think that. I think that we'll probably still be here, that Ryan will still be writing code, and that I'll still be teaching at Andrew College. Hopefully, I will still be doing my YouTube channel because I'm really having a lot of fun with it now. Hopefully, I'll have some more published books by that time.
So how many books have you written?
Well, so my mother and I wrote the book together. There Was Once a Team that you interviewed us about a few years ago when we did that.
Right.
That's really my mom's book that I helped a little bit with. And then I also finished writing a book this past summer that is a middle grade children's novel that I'm working on revising right now and would like to try to publish. And I have a couple of other books that I'm working on that are in the mystery genre that I'm not finished with either one of them, but it's definitely something that I want to do. And I'm trying to establish a daily writing habit, which is very difficult right now because I'm very busy. But I would like to have some published books within the next 10 years.
You will, and you're definitely gifted at writing. I mean, were you in the third grade when you won whatever that was, the regional first place? I can promise you there are people that will read what you write, and so go for it, Katie. Go for it.
Thank you.
You can figure out the time to do it. And just like you said, it adds up. Write a little bit a day and every day or whatever you do, and it adds up to be a book. That's great stuff. So let's talk about your YouTube channel. How do people find it?
They can search for While I Read with Katie Dodrill, and they should find it. The story of why it's called While I Read is that when I was 10 years old or around that age, I had a friend come over to my house to play. And we had a good time playing, but after a while, I really wanted to go back and finish the book that I was reading. And so I came up with the idea of telling my friend, you go jump on the trampoline while I read. And my parents overheard me telling her that. And so they still tease me about that to this day. So that's why the YouTube channel is called While I Read.
That's great. So you're right now, you're doing the top 10 books of 2023. What will you be doing going forward? Are you going to be talking about books you're reading, and what's your plan on the YouTube channel?
Yeah, so my first two videos are about my top 10 books of 2023. I split it into, 5 in one episode and 5 in another. I have another episode that I'm finishing up editing to publish at the end of this week that is about the cozy mystery genre, just talking about that genre and what it is and some books that I've read in that genre. And then I have another one where I'm just talking about some books that I've read recently. And so that's what I see myself doing, just talking about what I'm reading. I've talked to my daddy about being a guest on an episode with me, talking about Westerns by Louis L'Amour, because Daddy loves reading those, and I've read a few of those, and they are very good. So, and one day I may have Sarah on as a guest talking about some of our favorite books to read together. So I've just got all kind of plans for what I want to do.
The people that read are looking for good books to read. There are a lot of people that don't spend much time reading that hopefully by listening to you will get them thinking about reading. But there's some people that read that are always looking for a good book to read. So it's also always something you can turn to. You search While I Read, WHILE, I Read by Katie Dodrill, Dodrill. So you guys search it on YouTube, check Katie out. You'll be glad you did. I can tell you that. Katie, any other closing comments to this audience that's listening in? Some of them are riding down the road listening to you and me talk.
Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate you for asking me to do this and for taking the time to interview me. And I appreciate the people who've taken the time to listen to it. And I'll love it if they'll watch my channel and subscribe to it. And hopefully they can get some ideas for some books to read.
Folks, you want to check this gal out. She's special. Katie, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
This has been a blast. Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
You take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.